3 days after the incident, the Galactic Unity docked at Harmony Point Station. The diplomatic negotiations were scheduled to begin immediately, but the atmosphere had changed dramatically from what anyone had expected. Ambassador Krell requested a private meeting with the human delegation before the official session started. Rodriguez found himself sitting across from the Zalarian diplomat in a secure conference room, along with Earth's chief negotiator, Ambassador Sarah Chun. The incident with Commander Zexhai has created significant interest among the other delegations, Krell began diplomatically. Several species are requesting meetings to discuss potential military cooperation agreements with Earth. Ambassador Chun raised an eyebrow. What kind of cooperation? Training exchanges, joint operations planning, technology sharing. Krell consulted his datapad. The Serpentine Defense Corps wants to establish a formal alliance. The Thraxian Military Academy is requesting human instructors. 3 different species have asked about purchasing Earth military equipment. And the Valorians? Chun asked. Commander Zexhai has been recalled to his homeworld for debriefing, Krell replied carefully. His government is reassessing their intelligence estimates regarding human military capabilities. Rodriguez remained silent, but he could imagine what that reassessment involved. Valorian military doctrine was based on their assumption of superiority over all other species. Having that assumption challenged by a supposedly primitive human would require major strategic revisions. There's also been considerable interest in Staff Sergeant Rodriguez specifically, Krell continued. Several intelligence services want to understand how Earth's Special Operations training produces these results. I'm not particularly interested in sharing training details, Rodriguez said quietly. Some information is classified for good reasons. Of course, but perhaps some general insights could be provided? The tactical approach you used was unlike anything in standard galactic combat doctrine. Rodriguez considered the request carefully. Different environments produce different solutions. Earth has unique challenges that shaped our military development, such as hostile environment, limited resources, diverse terrain, multiple intelligent adversaries. Rodriguez kept his explanation brief. Our training adapts soldiers to handle uncertainty and resource scarcity. What he didn't mention was that Earth's most significant military challenge came from fighting other humans. No other species in the galaxy had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare against opponents with identical physical capabilities and intelligence levels. That crucible had produced military techniques far more sophisticated than anything needed for fighting aliens with predictable anatomical weaknesses. Krell made notes on his datapad. The Galactic Security Council has also expressed interest in Earth's potential contributions to peacekeeping operations. What kind of operations? Ambassador Chun asked. There are several ongoing conflicts in the Outer Rim systems. Pirate activities, territorial disputes, insurgent movements. Traditional military responses have been ineffective. Rodriguez understood the implications. Galactic militaries were designed for large-scale warfare between technological civilizations. They weren't equipped to handle guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, or operations in hostile environments, where advanced technology provided limited advantages. Earth's military had centuries of experience with exactly those situations. We'll need to discuss any potential deployments with our government, Chun replied diplomatically. Earth's military commitments are carefully controlled. The truth was more complex. Earth's government was already debating how much to reveal about human military capabilities. Some officials wanted to maintain the facade of primitive technology to avoid attracting dangerous attention. Others argued for demonstrating strength. To gain respect and better negotiating positions, the confrontation between Rodriguez and Zexhai had forced the issue. Human military capabilities were no longer secret, but the full extent remained unknown to galactic intelligence services. That afternoon, the formal negotiations began in Harmony Point's main conference center. The agenda covered trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and resource allocation, standard diplomatic business that usually proceeded according to well-established protocols, but the dynamics had shifted significantly. Species that had previously dismissed Earth's input were now paying careful attention to human proposals. Ambassador Hyun found herself in a much stronger negotiating position than anyone had anticipated. Earth's position on mining rights in the Kepler sector seems reasonable, commented the Altarian trade representative. Perhaps we could establish a joint development agreement. 6 months earlier, the same representative had suggested that humans lacked the technology for deep space mining operations. Now he was proposing partnership arrangements and offering advanced equipment sharing. Rodriguez sat in the security section, observing the proceedings while maintaining situational awareness. His presence was officially ceremonial, but every delegate in the room was conscious of what he represented. The human military was no longer seen as irrelevant to galactic affairs. During a recess period, Commander Thizes approached him directly. The Serpentine officer moved with the fluid grace typical of her species, but her body language showed respect rather than casual interest. "I've been analyzing the recording of your confrontation with Zexhai," she said without preamble. "Your technique was remarkably efficient. Thank you. I'm curious about one aspect. You position yourself to control his primary weapon arm while targeting his most vulnerable anatomical point. That suggests detailed knowledge of Valorian physiology." Rodriguez nodded slightly. "Good intelligence is essential for effective operations. Do you have similar intelligence on other species?" The question was casual, but Rodriguez recognized it as a professional inquiry. Commander Thizes was trying to determine whether humans had conducted detailed military analysis of potential galactic opponents. "We study available information on any species we might encounter," he replied carefully. "Standard preparation for diplomatic missions?" It was a diplomatic answer, but Thizes was experienced enough to read between the lines. Earth's military had apparently analyzed the combat weaknesses of every species represented at the negotiations. That level of preparation suggested a very different approach to galactic relations than most species employed. "Impressive foresight," Thizes commented. "Most species don't consider combat scenarios during diplomatic planning. Different experiences lead to different preparations." Rodriguez said simply, what he didn't explain was that human military doctrine assumed every diplomatic contact might eventually lead to conflict. Earth's history of warfare had taught painful lessons about the importance of preparation for worst-case scenarios. The negotiations continued through the following days. But the real business was happening in private meetings between delegations. Species were reassessing their relationships with Earth, trying to determine whether humans should be treated as potential allies, competitors, or threats. Zexhai's replacement arrived on the second day, General Carvex, a senior Valorian officer with extensive combat experience. Unlike his predecessor, Carvex approached the human delegation with obvious caution and professional respect. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," he said formally, "I've reviewed the recording of your encounter with Commander Zexhai. Your technique was educational." "Commander Zexhai fought honorably," Rodriguez replied diplomatically. "He was simply unprepared for unfamiliar tactics." "Indeed. We have been overconfident in our assessment of human capabilities." Carvex paused. "Perhaps our species could benefit from training exchanges. We could offer advanced weapons technology in return for tactical instruction." The offer was significant. Valorians had never proposed military cooperation with any species they considered inferior. The fact that they were now requesting human training indicated a major shift in their strategic thinking. "That would be a decision for our respective governments," Rodriguez replied. "But I'm sure Earth would be interested in discussions." Similar conversations were taking place throughout Harmony Point Station. Every military representative wanted to understand how Earth's supposedly primitive soldiers had developed such effective combat techniques. The answers they received were carefully limited, but impressive enough to generate serious interest in formal military relationships. Dr. Vexstar published his medical analysis of the confrontation in the station's intelligence database. His clinical assessment of Rodriguez's physiological capabilities sparked immediate requests for additional Information about human military training methods? Remarkable. Stress tolerance and recovery rates? His report concluded. Subject demonstrates conditioning consistent with extreme environmental exposure and high-intensity combat training. Recommend upgrading threat assessment for Earth military forces. The report was classified at the highest security levels, but its conclusions filtered through intelligence channels within hours. Every major government in the galaxy now knew that human soldiers were significantly more dangerous than previously believed. On the final day of negotiations, Ambassador Chun found herself in the unprecedented position of fielding multiple alliance proposals. Earth had arrived at Harmony. Zexhai stared at the offered hand for a long moment before reluctantly accepting the help. Rodriguez pulled him to his feet with surprising strength for someone so much smaller. The Valorian's legs were still unsteady and his pride was shattered completely. "How?" Zexhai whispered, his voice barely audible above the cargo bay's ventilation systems. Rodriguez adjusted his uniform collar. "Training," he said simply. "Same as any soldier." The watching delegates began murmuring among themselves in dozens of different languages. Some were analyzing what they had witnessed. Others were questioning their assumptions about human capabilities. And a few were already thinking about the political implications of this unexpected development. Ambassador Krell of the Zalarian Trade Federation pushed through the crowd. His species was known for careful observation and detailed record-keeping, which made them excellent diplomats and analysts. "Remarkable technique," he said, addressing Rodriguez directly. "I've never seen Valorian combat training countered so efficiently." "Every fighting style has weaknesses," Rodriguez replied. "The key is recognizing them quickly enough to exploit them." Zexhai's head snapped up. "Weaknesses?" "Valorian combat techniques have been perfected over centuries of warfare. We've defeated every enemy we've ever faced." "Until today," observed a voice from the crowd. The speaker was Commander Theises of the Serpentine Defense Corps, a species known for their strategic thinking and analytical approach to warfare. Her scaled features showed genuine interest rather than mockery. "This was a fluke," Zexhai insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Human techniques might work once through surprise, but not in real combat situations. Rodriguez said nothing, but several delegates noticed the slight smile that crossed his face. It was the expression of someone who had heard similar claims before and knew exactly how wrong they were. "Perhaps you could demonstrate these techniques for our analysts," suggested Ambassador Krell. "For educational purposes?" "Of course, I think we've had enough demonstrations for one day," Rodriguez replied diplomatically. "Besides, the techniques I used are basic level. Nothing special." Basic level? The word sent a chill through every military representative present. If what they had just witnessed was considered basic, what were advanced human combat techniques capable of accomplishing? Dr. Vexstar, the ship's medical officer, approached with a scanning device. "I need to check both combatants for injuries," he announced in his professional manner. The Altarian physician had treated combat wounds from every known species and was experienced in determining the extent of damage from various fighting techniques. Zexhai submitted to the scan reluctantly. The results showed minor bruising around his throat and solar plexus, plus elevated stress indicators, but no serious damage. For someone who had been completely dominated in combat, his injuries were surprisingly light. "Interesting," Dr. Vexstar noted. "The human controlled the level of force very precisely. These techniques were designed to disable rather than kill." That observation sparked new conversations among the delegates. Most galactic military training focused on eliminating enemies as quickly and efficiently as possible. The idea of deliberately limiting damage while maintaining complete control suggested a very different philosophy of warfare. Rodriguez underwent his own medical scan, which showed elevated heart rate and muscle tension consistent with brief physical exertion, but nothing approaching the stress levels typically seen after combat. His recovery time was remarkably fast, almost like he had been through a light training exercise rather than a fight. "Your species has interesting physiological responses to stress," Dr. Vexstar commented. Most soldiers show much higher indicators after combat situations. We train under stress regularly, Rodriguez explained. The body adapts to handle pressure more efficiently. Captain Mordek, the ship's commanding officer, finally arrived in the cargo bay. The Kavarian naval officer was responsible for maintaining order during the diplomatic mission, and unauthorized combat between delegates was definitely not part of his planned schedule. What exactly happened here? He demanded, his 4 eyes scanning the crowd for explanations. Multiple voices began speaking at once, each delegate offering their own version of events. Captain Mordek raised one of his secondary hands for silence, then pointed at the ship's security chief. "Show me the recording." The security hologram activated, displaying the entire confrontation from multiple angles. Captain Mordek watched in silence as the 3-second fight played out before him. When it finished, he ordered an immediate replay, this time in slow motion. Even at reduced speed, Rodriguez's movements were difficult to follow. His initial dodge seemed almost casual, like he was simply stepping aside rather than evading a lethal attack. The follow-up strikes were delivered with mechanical precision, each blow targeting specific anatomical weak points with surgical accuracy. "Pause recording," Captain Mordek ordered. The hologram froze at the moment Rodriguez applied the chokehold. "Magnify the grip technique." The image enlarged to show exactly how Rodriguez had positioned his forearm across Zexhi's throat. The angle was perfect, the pressure points precisely targeted, and the leverage absolutely optimal for controlling a larger opponent. Resume playback. The final second of the fight showed Zexhi's complete surrender, followed by Rodriguez's immediate release and professional demeanor. There was no showboating, no victory celebration, no unnecessary aggression. Just efficient combat technique followed by appropriate restraint. "Security assessment," Captain Mordek requested. "The human delegate poses a significant tactical threat," his security chief reported. "Combat effectiveness far exceeds initial intelligence estimates. Recommend immediate upgrade of threat classification." Zexhi listened to the assessment with growing humiliation. Being defeated was bad enough, but having his defeat analyzed and documented by Galactic Security was infinitely worse. His reputation as an undefeated warrior was now officially ended. "I request a rematch," he announced suddenly. "Full combat rules? No restrictions?" "Denied," Captain Mordek replied immediately. "We're not running a combat tournament, Commander. This incident is already beyond acceptable diplomatic protocols." But the human caught me off guard. "In a real fight, with proper preparation, in a real fight, you'd be dead," Commander Thises interrupted. The human deliberately chose non-lethal techniques. His positioning was perfect for neck-breaking, eye-gouging, or windpipe crushing. He showed remarkable restraint. The observation hit Zexhi like a physical blow. He had been so focused on his own defeat that he hadn't considered how much worse it could have been. Rodriguez had been in complete control throughout the entire confrontation, choosing exactly how much damage to inflict. "Earth military training must be quite comprehensive," Ambassador Krell noted. "We should consider arranging formal exchanges between our species' military academies." "That might be problematic," Rodriguez said carefully. "Our training methods are ... intensive. Not all species might find them suitable." Several delegates exchanged glances. The diplomatic phrasing was polite, but the implication was clear. Human military training was probably too harsh for other species to handle. Given what they had just witnessed, that possibility was starting to seem very plausible. "What kind of training produces these results?" asked Commander Thises. Rodriguez considered the question carefully. "Selection is highly competitive. Most candidates don't complete the program. Those who do learn to operate in extreme environments with minimal resources, often behind enemy lines." "How extreme?" Dr. Vextar asked from a medical perspective. "Desert survival, Arctic operations, underwater infiltration, high-altitude insertion, urban warfare, jungle reconnaissance." Rodriguez listed the categories matter-of-factly, plus specialized skills like demolitions, marksmanship, languages, medical training, and communications. The list was impressive enough by galactic standards. Most species' elite forces specialized in one or two environments, not a comprehensive range of operational theaters. But something in Rodriguez's tone suggested there was more to human training than environmental adaptation. Psychological conditioning? Commander Theises pressed. Resistance to interrogation, stress inoculation, decision-making under pressure, teamwork in life-threatening situations. Rodriguez paused. And learning to complete missions regardless of personal cost. That last item sent another chill through the military representatives. The idea of soldiers trained to accept certain death in order to complete objectives was disturbing to most galactic species. Valorians were warriors, but even they preferred to survive their battles. How many humans receive this training? Ambassador Krell asked. Special Operations Forces are a small percentage of our total military, Rodriguez replied. But we have multiple branches with different specializations. Multiple branches? Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Green Berets, Marine Force Recon, Air Force Pararescue, Delta Force. Rodriguez ticked off the units casually. Each has specific mission profiles and training standards. HFY was listening to this exchange with growing alarm. Not only had he been defeated by a human soldier, but that soldier represented just one branch of Earth's Special Operations, C. The transport ship Galactic Unity hummed through the void between star systems, carrying diplomatic representatives from 12 different species to the neutral station. Harmony Point? The mission was simple enough: establish new trade agreements and discuss territorial boundaries in the Outer Rim systems. What should have been routine political theater was about to become something far more interesting. Commander HFY of the Valorian Defense Corps stood 7 feet tall, his blue-scaled skin gleaming under the ship's artificial lighting. His species had dominated galactic warfare for over 3 centuries, their natural strength and combat instincts making them the most feared soldiers in known space. The Valorians had never lost a war, never backed down from a fight, and never met a species they couldn't crush if needed. HFY adjusted his ceremonial armor, the metal plates decorated with symbols representing his 43 confirmed kills in combat. Each mark was earned fighting different alien species across the galaxy. He was proud of his record and made sure everyone knew it. In his mind, warfare was simple. The strongest survived, the weak died, and the Valorians were always the strongest. The human delegation occupied a small section near the transport's rear. HFY had barely paid attention to them during boarding. Earth was a new addition to the Galactic Council, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their planet was small, their technology primitive by galactic standards, and their military presence almost laughable. Most species viewed humans as useful for basic labor and trade, but certainly not as any kind of threat. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez sat quietly in the human section, reading a datapad containing briefing materials for the upcoming negotiations. His dress uniform was simple compared to the elaborate outfits worn by other species representatives. No ornate armor, no glowing symbols, no ceremonial weapons, just clean lines and basic fabric. With only a few small ribbons indicating his service record, Rodriguez had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Somalia, and 1 classified operation he couldn't discuss even with his family. The Navy SEALs had trained him to handle impossible situations with limited resources. He could survive in any environment, eliminate targets without leaving traces, and complete missions that others considered suicide runs. But to anyone looking at him, he just seemed like an ordinary human soldier. The trouble started during the meal period. The ship's dining area was designed to accommodate different species' needs, with various atmospheric zones and food options. HFY was entertaining a group of junior officers from other delegations, telling stories about his combat experiences. The crystalline warriors thought their energy shields made them invincible. HFY boomed, his voice carrying across the dining area. It took me less than 5 minutes to tear through their entire squad. Their technology couldn't stop Valorian strength and training. The younger officers hung on every word. Stories of Valorian military prowess were legendary throughout the galaxy. Other species sent their warriors to train with Valorian instructors hoping to learn even basic versions of their techniques. "What about the mechanical collective?" asked a young Thraxian diplomat. "I heard their combat androids were extremely difficult to defeat." Zexhai laughed, the sound like rocks grinding together. "Machines are predictable. They follow programming patterns. I destroyed 8 of their heavy combat units in single combat. The key is understanding that no artificial intelligence can match natural warrior instincts." Rodriguez continued eating his meal, not paying attention to the conversation. He had heard similar boasting from soldiers of many different armies. In his experience, the ones who talked the most about their combat prowess usually had the least actual field experience. "Tell us about Earth's military," called out a Zalarian trade representative. Surely humans must have interesting combat techniques. The question was clearly meant as a joke. Most galactic species viewed human military capabilities as primitive at best. Earth's weapons used chemical explosives and metal projectiles, while advanced civilizations employed energy weapons and molecular disruptors. Human soldiers wore fabric uniforms, while others had personal force fields and powered armor. Zexhai's attention turned toward the human section. His eyes fixed on Rodriguez, who was still focused on his meal. "Earth's military?" Zexhai's voice carried an amused tone. "I don't think they have one worth mentioning." Several officers chuckled. Even species that were generally friendly toward humans tended to view their military as quaint rather than effective. Earth had never been involved in galactic conflicts, and their technology seemed centuries behind current standards. "Their soldiers look soft," continued Zexhai, standing to get a better view of Rodriguez. "No combat scars, no enhancement modifications, no real weapons. I wonder if they've ever actually fought anyone." Rodriguez looked up from his datapad. His brown eyes met Zexhai's glowing yellow ones across the dining area. The human's expression was calm, almost bored. He didn't seem offended or threatened by the comments. "Perhaps one of them would like to demonstrate their combat techniques," Zexhai suggested loudly. "I'm always interested in learning about new fighting styles." The dining area had gone quiet. Other delegates sensed the tension building and were curious to see how the humans would respond. Most species had strict protocols about challenges between military representatives, but Valorians were known for pushing boundaries. Rodriguez set down his fork and stood up slowly. He was several inches shorter than Zexhai and looked almost tiny by comparison. Where the Valorian was covered in thick scales and visible muscle, the human appeared fragile and unimpressive. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Rodriguez said in a calm voice. "We're here for diplomatic negotiations, not combat demonstrations." Zexhai took a step closer. "Of course. I wouldn't want to risk injuring a delegate over a simple demonstration. Earth probably can't spare many soldiers." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Other delegates shifted uncomfortably, but none moved to intervene. Diplomatic immunity protected everyone present. But unofficial conflicts between military representatives were often overlooked as long as they didn't escalate too far. "I've heard that human soldiers are trained for something called peacekeeping," Zexhai continued. "Is that like real combat or more like crowd control?" Rodriguez remained perfectly still. His posture was relaxed, his hands empty and visible. To most observers, he looked like someone trying to avoid a confrontation. "We train for many different types of operations," he replied. "Such as?" "Counterterrorism, direct action, special reconnaissance, hostage rescue." Rodriguez's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was reading from a manual. "Standard special operations tasks?" Zexhai laughed again. "Special operations? On a planet that hasn't fought a real war in decades? What could you possibly know about actual combat?" Other delegates were watching carefully now. The Valorian was clearly pushing for some kind of response, but the humans seemed determined to avoid giving him one. In galactic politics, backing down from a challenge usually indicated weakness, and weakness invited exploitation. "I know enough," Rodriguez said simply. "Prove it." The words hung in the air like a physical challenge. Zexhai had essentially issued a formal combat challenge, something that couldn't be ignored without losing face. Other military representatives would view refusal as cowardice, which would undermine Earth's position in future negotiations. Rodriguez considered his options. He could refuse and damage humanity's reputation, or accept and risk creating a diplomatic incident. There was also a third possibility, one that his training had prepared him for. "What did you have in mind?" he asked. Zexai's eyes lit up with anticipation. "Hand-to-hand combat. No weapons, no armor, no enhancements. Just natural fighting ability. That seems reasonable." The Valorian was clearly expecting more resistance. Rodriguez's calm acceptance caught him off guard for a moment. "The cargo bay has enough space," Zexai said. "Unless you'd prefer smaller quarters?" "The cargo bay is fine." Word spread quickly through the ship. Within minutes, delegates from every species were making their way to the cargo bay to witness the confrontation. Some came out of curiosity, others to support their respective allies, and a few simply wanted to see what would happen when primitive human techniques met advanced Valorian combat training. The cargo bay was a large, open space with high ceilings and reinforced walls. Standard gravity and atmosphere made it suitable for most species present. Someone had activated the ship's recording systems, ensuring the confrontation would be preserved for later analysis. Zexai removed his ceremonial armor, revealing the thick, muscled form underneath. His scales provided natural protection equivalent to light armor, and his claws could tear through most materials. Valorian warriors were bred for combat, with enhanced bone density, improved reflexes, and pain tolerance far beyond normal biological limits. Rodriguez simply removed his dress uniform jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His arms showed the lean muscle development of someone who maintained peak physical condition, but nothing that seemed impressive compared to his opponent's obvious advantages. "Final chance to reconsider," Zexai offered, though his tone suggested he hoped the human would refuse. "I appreciate the offer," Rodriguez replied. "B.